That'll give me a done. Hello?
Three. There you go.
Oh, okay. Is that better?
Yeah.
Can you hear me at the back?
Yeah, boy.
Right, okay. Yeah, just sort of, I'll just try and thread something together. I mean, okay, I'm a former Royal Marine, but first and foremost, I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, and I've worked in the risk management security sector for about 30 years since leaving the military. So the military isn't something that I define myself by, but I did realise quite early on during this process that going up to London and seeing what was being orchestrated up there, that it was important that people knew that there was at least one sort of force that was going to stand with the people. So, against my normal... I mean, the first thing I did when I left the military, if I'm being completely honest, was take a uniform to an army surplus shop, and never wanted to identify with that again. But I am proud of having served, and at the height of this, it was disappointing that when we put a shout out to other veterans, we could only get 40 veterans to appear in London. And actually, the first school we actually went to in 2020, I went with 3 70-year-old ladies. So I'm grateful to all of you and all the people that have done what you've done to get us to this point, because without us all coming together and doing that, this would have taken a lot longer. And I do have a different perception on everything, because right at the start, January 2020, I was doing a risk assessment to move a corporate company's employees out of China. So I saw very early on that what the fake narratives they were putting out had been contained to one area. And on the 19th of March 2020, which everyone's very well aware of now, they downgraded COVID from a highly infectious disease to a non-highly infectious disease, and then proceeded to unlawfully lock us all down on the 24th of March, announcing it on the 23rd. So I continued to the first thing I did was try and use my experience to reach out to local MPs, the police and crime commissioner, and the schools, the school age immunisation teams. First of all, it was the fact that they'd stopped all of our sons and daughters going to school, and then it became about the masks. And then I could see that the narrative was being pushed, and it was all directed at eventually getting people to take this gene editing bioweapon. And I'd seen the clinical trials, Pfizer quite early on, and I'd seen the little girl who'd been disabled during the trials. And it was an overwhelming calling. It was, I remember walking out of a friend's place during the lockdown, and they made a comment because I'd started training that I'd lost weight, and it just came from nowhere, and I said, yeah, I'm preparing for war. And that is basically, I said to Madeline, I'm not going to stop until this is officially over. And, coming up to date now, I'm very much in that place, having been through the process I've been through. I've been arrested 4 times. The first time, December 2021, a week after I spoke in York on the 4th of December. And I did reach out on the 4th of December to the military, to the NHS, to the police. And I used Lee Merritt, Lieutenant Colonel Lee Merritt's statistics from the US military. And she stated that over a 31-year period, there'd only ever been 319 cases of myocarditis. And from the January to the September of 2021, there'd been 1,113 cases. And I said, if this is replicated here, it will be a national security threat. And on the 29th of November, so only 5 days prior to that, the UK government had actually put myocarditis as an adverse reaction to the gene-edited bioweapon. So then we proceeded to serve the Chief Constables of Dorset and Hampshire on the 11th of the 1st, 2022. We had a letter from the Community Assembly, and we asked them to make a public announcement and immediately halt the bioweapon. On the Yellow Card scheme, the MHRA, there were already 2,000 deaths and 1.3 million adverse reactions. We then went to one of the largest centres in Bournemouth, the Kings Park Community Hospital, on the 18th of the 1st, 2022. We made a 999 call. We asked for a forensic van to be on site, for the bars to be removed with a secure chain of custody, and we wanted the place closed down. I realised that day, after speaking to a constable, then a sergeant, then an inspector, and the inspector saying to me, after me giving him all the information, his response was, well, what do you want me to do? I have a mortgage to pay and children to feed. So I knew we were going to have to keep going, and it was going to be a continual effort. But over that weekend, 60 other sites around the UK were actually closed. So all the people that I've talked to recently, they've said, well, nothing's happened. Well, actually, within a week of doing that, the UK dropped all the mandates. So to give you an example, when people say nothing's happening or nothing's progressed, we managed to stop the rollout of the bioweapon in the schools, which was announced by the BBC, believe it or not, in the October of 2021. And that's because we served them again prior to the school starting in the September. And unfortunately, a young girl was lost and 2 young boys collapsed at the school, and then they removed. But the narrative they said was Dr. Kate Harvey, who was in charge of the school age immunisation team, they said she retired, removed. But the excuse they used then was that because of staff shortages. So now you're seeing in the now all the chief constables around the UK getting taken out of their positions, and they're all under investigation for gross misconduct in public office. There'll be a backstory to it, but it won't actually be the truth. And this is what we've seen all the way through this process. So if you look at where we currently are, and people are still referring to courts as courts, we're missing a massive point, because they're not courts. They're deceptive, fraudulent, treasonous places of business. Every single corporation in the United Kingdom is registered on Dun & Bradstreet. So they're all foreign entities for profit, controlled. So if Yvonne Watson's case is a prime example, Northumbria against Yvonne Watson, District Judge Heather Searle ruled the gap cannot be bridged between the legal fiction and the corporation. That ties in with the fact that the birth certificate on the 10th of March 2025 was ruled as securities fraud, as cited in the Austin Chronicle. We have then evoked the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. And the reason that jumped out to me is the first thing it said was 99% of lawyers and barristers do not know about this. And the reason being, it says very clearly, any deviation in due process, from the beginning to the end, everything must be dismissed. So when I went into Parliament on the 15th of July 2025, and I had the opportunity to speak to a barrister they were filming in the room, I asked him if he knew about the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. And he went, yeah. And so I said, well, the fact that the birth certificate has been classed as securities fraud. And that is your creation of our legal fiction. And we've now evoked the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine. That means that from the moment we arrive and take our first breath, everything that has been laid upon us ever since must be dismissed. Yeah. So, and I was also approached by the MP Rupert Lowe, and he asked me why I was there, and I said, do you really want to know? And I was actually there with the National Inquiry for the Green gangs, so I had no intention of saying, I was just sat at the back of the room. So I took the opportunity and I said to him, I just want to make you aware that we, the people, know that under your Terrorism Act 2000, Section 114, the rollout of a noxious or toxic substance, including a bioweapon, is an act of terrorism. Our belligerent government have rolled out a genocide attack on us all. And he looked at me, and people were gathering around and listening. And his response to me was, so what's next? And I said, well, as the new Black Rod of Parliament is the former Major General of the Royal Marines, this deceptive, fraudulent, treasonous place of business must be immediately closed. Depending on your complicity in the crimes, justice must be served. And we now need our military and the Military Global Alliance to assist us in removing the remaining hazards to us all. And his response was, I can't disagree. So I'm just passing on a message that I know that this is done, and if everyone now stands in that truth and in that honour, knowing that they're not courts, so why would you give your energy to something when they've already told you you've got case law? Yvonne Watson's case law is M2EC 5653. So you don't even need to engage with these people, because I have given to every court that we are under the Law of War 2015, revised July 2023, Chapter 33, War Powers Resolution, 50 USC 1550, Executive Order 13848, which was actually re-signed on the 28th of August this year, which can only be signed under emergency powers, and Executive Order 13818, Crimes Against Humanity, stand. And the police have willfully and deliberately suppressed information that would have prevented further loss, harm, injury and suffering, which is misconduct in public office at a minimum, because only a month ago, that 2,000 death rate on the ONS had increased to 248,000. So that's the reality of where we are. And that's why I continually explain and try and get it across that we have the power. And we had to come from the bottom up. Because how else can we ensure that this never occurs again? Without knowing. That's why when Vince used the reference, the advanced party directory, some of us had to go forward and take the slings and the arrows and be willing to make the sacrifices. So that's why I'm proud to sit here and be with people that have done that. Because I know without everyone doing what they've done, we wouldn't be sat here now. So it's, I don't see any of it as exciting. The thing I know is when we talk about Vince was talking about, God, this has been a spiritual battle. This has been a continual attack on us. And if you just go back to John D. Rockefeller's Masonic Creed in the Secret Covenant, he says, we will keep their lives short. We will keep their minds weakened, all the while making them believe we're doing the opposite. Now, if you were to put that into AI and say, how do I achieve that? We have just lived through the construct of every system that has orchestrated that against us. So we had to free our minds. We had to realise that our God, our life force energy, our light, our soul is within. And the only way I can explain that is every system is decompartmentalised, whether it's in industry, whether it's in banking. No one knows what anyone else is doing. So if you look at that as quantum entanglement, we just had to unravel and connect the dots. And how interesting that the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine we've taken to the end, which is actually the story at the beginning, the temptation to take the bite of a fruit from a poisonous tree, is now the solution at the end, which is the beginning, if that makes any sense. And it has been. Religion in Latin means relegare, to bind again, to keep in bondage. All religion actually refer 1 John 1.15, God is light, in him is no darkness at all. In the beginning there was a word, the word turned to flesh, the flesh walks amongst us. You know, we are the power and the glory. You know, together we will create heaven on earth. And as frequency coalesces mass, we will continue to grow together. And it is about raising of consciousness. But we are these incredibly powerful beings that they never wanted us to know. And we have been enslaved and entrapped. But now we're free. And we have to live like that. And we have to know it. So there is nothing to fear at all. And when I've been recently to help people get their houses back or reclaim a house, and I've spoken to a police officer, he turned around and said, Steve, it's all fraud, isn't it? I'm like, yeah. You know, it's, you know, I was hugging a locksmith within 10 minutes of him turning up at another house. And I said to them, he said, this isn't happening, is it? And I said, no, it's not. We all need to come together now. This is what it's all about. But, you know, that's why I've never taken any of it personally. And any time I have been arrested, I've just taken the opportunity to do an interview. I literally do a podcast when I'm sat there. I don't even refer to what they've arrested. It's just like, bang, you know, all you're going to hear is the truth. And then it gets played in court, and then it's done. So it's pretty much where we are. So if anyone wants to ask any questions or wants any information on anything.
Yeah. Some questions on these acts and things which you've obviously got in your mind, which I'd just like to check out. You said we are under the law of war, 50 UC,
50 USC 1550.
550, and you said...
It's the law of war, if you look at the law of war manual 2015.
Right. And then after that, you mentioned the executive order, the crimes against humanity,
13818.
13818. And so did those things like jump out at you, or were you studying them?
No, they just jumped out at me. Yeah. See, I mean, there's a lot more I could sort of talk about. I mean, at the beginning of 2020, one of the main driving things was I kept seeing this constant referral to war. but it was spiritual, biblical, cyber, military, and psychological. And obviously the psychological part was using the mainstream media to get everyone into that state of fear. But I kept seeing the reference to the Schumann resonance, the Earth's resonance. So I spent all my life, the younger life, just doing sport. I left school at 15 with no qualification. That's all I did, jump off of buildings and run. And so I wanted to know what that would do to me in the physical, because people were talking about getting extra strands of DNA and getting upgrades and everything else, and I was like, what does that mean? How could that possibly happen without there being some physical work to be done? So when I put in what would the symptoms of the highest spike in the Schumann resonance be, they were exactly the same as they were saying as the fake COVID. So I was like, okay. So if I then use frequency to enhance that and speed it up, it's going to be cool, right? So that's what I did. I used 432 hertz every night for 2 years, and after a few weeks, it was like I didn't know what to do with the energy. And then my cognitive abilities got better, and things kept coming. And what I tried to do is, because I don't have social media, is I would use my friends as test cases. So if I experienced something, I'd say it's really weird. As soon as I started feeling this, I kept seeing double numbers. And then next thing I know, my friends would be sending me photos from their car and their phones. And so I was gauging the progression of what was happening when people were going through the same process. And it's real and it's physical. And yeah, so that's pretty much. But it makes complete sense now, because if you say to someone now, because when you grasp that everything is about frequency and vibration, and I can see the energy in the atmosphere. So neuroscientists say that 95% of everything we put into that energy field comes from our subconscious. So it makes complete sense if that's programmable through psychological warfare and frequency. If you can get your energy flow going and unblock, a lot of trauma is blocked energy. Every single plant in nature has a unique vibration and frequency. So when people talk about doing plant-based medicine and everything else, that can take you over the edge. But if you use the purity of the frequency, that will have the same effects. Like raw rain of Wright proved in 1930 that 1150 hertz would eradicate mutated cells, like cancer cells. So they've always known this, but it's just been hidden from us. So I see frequency as the key to our unlocking. And everyone talks about the pineal gland as just a single point, but you have your pineal gland and your pituitary gland. So you've got your solar and lunar energy. Pineal gland is electrical, solar, and has oscillating crystals in it. So the actual feeling of when that's activated is when your pituitary gland, you feel the energy come up your pituitary gland, but that is magnetic. And when they combine together, when you want to release your energy, you can actually feel your head, it spins like that, and then you can squeeze and push out the energy. And that's what people have been showing us for years with chi and everything else. But we have the ability, we emit 20 photons of light per second from our chest area, proven in a controlled experiment at Castle University in 1999. Now, if you do heart-based meditation and breath work, you can increase that to 100,000 photons of light per second. If you then infuse that with healing, love, and intent, you can physically move matter and change the course of negative events. That's why I get excited when you're walking around London and you've got 2 billion people who are standing in their truth, shining their light, and want change. That's why I got emotional when I spoke about it before, because I knew that was a moment. And I knew that was taking us to where we needed to go to. And that's why we had to come together. And why do you think they've always tried to separate us? And they've used every single thing they could do to do it. Race being one of them, religion the other, and war. And that's a hard thing when you've served, is to come to that realisation that it's all a lie. And the Second World War never ended, it just went underground. You know, they took all the Operation Paperclip, took all the Germans into the CIA, into NASA.
Yeah.
You know, and this was their last ditched attempt to eradicate us, and they wanted 500 million left, and they failed. Because our greatest power is love and compassion, and that is the life force energy within us all.
Can you tell us about the courts? Because we've had a few run-ins with the courts.
Yeah. See, I've been through the whole court process myself, so what I wanted to do was test and find out, how do you take back your sovereignty? How, you know, people were going down the common law route and they were doing everything else, and I got to a point where I was like, I can't play this game, because prior to that process, before it was made personal to me, I'd been serving judges who were about to make a ruling that a child in care was going to be forcibly given this, that and the other, and they went ahead and did it. So I'd already got to a place where I had zero respect, and I knew that they weren't the court. So what I did prior to going to their place of business is I sent them their Dun and Bradstreet numbers. I sent them a statement.
Magistrates court or?
I went to magistrates initially, and what I did there is I went through the whole process. So when I was asked my name, what I did is I sent them all the documentation first, Dun and Bradstreet.
Yeah.
I sent them a replied email from the NHS showing all the adverse reactions and jabs, the NHS acknowledging that. I explained that the police under the Terrorism Act had committed an act of terrorism. And then I phoned them up the day prior to going into their place of business and said, I've been invited to your place of business for a meeting, is it still scheduled for then? And he said, yes sir, it is. So I said, well, I'd still like to come to the meeting because I'd like to speak my truth. When I got there, the judge was sat down, which, having been to the court loads of times with members of the community, they were still going through the pomp and ceremony at the time, where everyone sat down and they stand up, and then you either decide to do it or not. But they were sat down, so I knew that I'd already got them into a different jurisdiction. And then they played the game. They asked me my name. I said, it's written in the incorrect style. Could you please, for the record, change it to this? And they dismissed it. And is this your date of birth? I said, well, I refer to that as my date of first breath. They ignored it. And then I said, and the other thing I know, in your law, fiction yields to truth. And there is no legal fiction where there is truth. Any attachment, real, presumed or otherwise, on my personal or private, godly estate, from fertilisation to last breath, is trespass. I am whole, I am present, I am fully accounted for, from fertilisation to last breath. So it is. So I went through that whole process. And then there's further things. But then I was then taken to court, Crown Court, after the magistrates, by the King. Not Rex or CPS. It had to be a living person. So what I did is I took that opportunity, so I challenged the King. I said, I have the right to meet my accuser. King Charles is not my king. As you have messed me around, the ball is now in my court. And when I went into that place, Casey William Mousley was the presiding judge, And the first thing he said to me, I went straight in, sat down. He said, "You do not need to stand." I said, "I know." He said, "The other thing I'd like you to know is that I've read and I acknowledge all of your emails and correspondence." So I knew that was a court of record, it was a criminal court. And then he put the onus onto the CPS to do the right thing, and they refused to. His reply to them was, "Well, considering what I've seen, I would seriously go back and have a word with your people, and we need to have a conversation after this." So, and he set a 6-month date for trial procedure. He gave them certain points to disclose the information that I'd requested. They didn't do it, and then lo and behold, I get an email on this was on the 21st of the 12th, 2023. I get an email, they'd missed their first opportunity on the 6th of January. I get an email on the 19th of January or the 20th of January saying I'm in court the next day at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Was there a charge?
It was assault by beating of a care worker, right, which could have got me 2 years a sentence, which I did. Obviously, they assaulted me, but that's what they do. They then throw it back at you.
Yeah.
So I thought, yeah. So I got an email from it's called the Common Platform, which I'd never heard of. It's a government website, telling me I was in court the next day at 10 o'clock. So I just said to Madeline, "Let's just go." So it was just myself and Madeline went. And they called out the name. We walked into the court and they all turned round and went, "Who are you?" And I went, "Well, the person whose name you just called out." And they said, "Well, you're not supposed to be here." I said, "Well, surely." And then the barrister looked at me and smiled and he went, "Well, how did you know?" And I said, "Well, I got an email from the Common Platform yesterday afternoon." And he said, "Well, I don't know how that happened." He said, "Because it was down all over the UK all day yesterday." And I was like, and anyway, cut a long story short, the judge said, "Look, sit down. We're on business time here, or work time, whatever he referred it to." He said, "There is no case to answer. The case is dismissed." And I got home, and I think within an hour of getting home, I received a letter through the letterbox from the Crown Prosecution Service, dated the day before, telling me that the case had been dismissed.
So what do you think happened? Who do you think sent me that?
What, the email?
Say that you were in hospital, in the court.
Divine, obviously. Yeah, yeah, someone who liked me.
But they didn't expect you to be in.
Yeah, bizarre. Yeah. I mean, what it shows you is that it's almost like they were throwing themselves under a bus, because the fact that they were convening a meeting just to divvy up some funds, they didn't even be present, did they? So it's just a showing. And this is the thing, I've never taken any of this personally at all, because I've just seen it as part of the mission. And if you take it personally, you get wrapped up and you get distracted. And I've never, even after they cut my arms and I was arrested, and they would have thought that I would then try and submit paperwork and get a claim. So if you do the opposite, you put them in a position where they're then wondering, should we better do something? And then that gives you another opportunity to then go and speak the truth. So So long and short of it is, I know it's done. It's just, if everyone else can just get their head around that, if you want to keep playing their game, they'll play it for as long as you want. Whereas me, every day this continues, we're unnecessarily losing someone that doesn't need to be lost, because we do have these advanced modalities. We do have the capability to heal people. We've been helping people who've been injured for the last 2-3 years. And we need to get on with it. And that's why I just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, because it needs to stop. And if you're in charge of a conflict and and you're making the decision maker of when to pull something, it's when you're in full control, the only decision can be made to stop further loss, harm, injury and suffering. And the narrative now is so stupid. You know, people have forgotten that 3 years ago, people were being offered donuts and ice creams to take a bite of it. You know, and wondering, why, you know, we're here now, people still saying, well, why is... You can obviously see that these people are all CGI, and they're actors, or they don't even look like the same individuals. You know, 2020, you think every world leader said they had COVID. If COVID didn't exist, they didn't get COVID, did they? They went away for 10 days, and then came back into the public arena. They all looked different. We were being shown Biden was never Biden. They made that so obvious. So they've been playing this psychological warfare against us. And we should know by now that the truth is they're done and finished.
Because you were arrested as well a few more times, wasn't you? Was
For
the driving thing?
yeah, I got
Was
it.
you,
Yeah,
sort of video that they got you out of the car or something?
yeah, I got stopped on the motorway by.
No, this one on the motorway. This is in the residential.
Oh yeah, that was another one. Yeah. Not that I'm proud of it. No, I mean, I know that they were doing sting operations and they were trying to put me in a place where I could, you know, it's been inconvenient.
They were targeting you.
Yeah, and they've stolen my car and they placed my bank account. And, you know, but at the end of the day, you can turn anything into a positive. And you know, I had to carry my shopping instead of putting it in the car, so I just got fitter and stronger. You know, it's and I was doing weights.
Steve, just a question. So, will we ever get accountability, do you think?
Yeah, I was saying...
Because after what happened to Dale and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, it's, you know, 2019, 1,160 CEOs of all the world corporations were removed. They all retired. You know, that's more CEOs leaving in 1 year than the 2008 crash, and that wasn't a coincidence. And then 2021, 2,500 were removed. So there's been this ongoing thing. It's like when I tried to explain to the military what was happening, because I could see the military were compromised because I'd seen the letters coercing them into taking the bioweapon. So I knew the military here were not up to speed. So the fact that a couple had reached out to me and said some of the guys had taken, had fallen sick after taking it. I said to them, well, now you can see when I'm saying I'm referring to this as their weapon of choice. I said, if you can acknowledge that, if that is the case, it's always a counter to a counter in warfare. So why would the Bears vaccine factory in Germany have been blown up, set alight? The largest vaccine factory in India set alight, the one in Cape Town, the one in Halifax. You know, there's been a counter to a counter, so it was a matter of connecting those dots as well and actually showing someone that there was stuff going on in the background. You know, we were following the earthquakes in 2020 because, and an earthquake has a P and an S resonance. We each had one resonance, a signature, which gave us the indication that that must have been some sort of weaponry that was being used. So these underground facilities were being taken out, and then they started referring, here there were 3 earthquakes in 3 days at RAF Stansbridge, there were earthquakes in Yorkshire and Scotland. So those tunnelling systems go into London, go to Milton Keynes, so that the infrastructure that they had was being destroyed. And obviously we all saw in 2020 the first aid ship at Central Park in New York with babies incubators on it and the tented areas. You know, we had the same thing on Salisbury Plain with Red Crosses. So there's been a lot of activity, concurrent activity going on in the background that unless you're looking for it, but if you're in fear, you're going to find fear. If you want to find a positivity, it's there in front of you. They're telling us all the time.
Another thing was during the early stages of COVID, they were building these like mega prisons. They were almost like FEMA cameras, like
But that,
being built around the UK.
yeah, I mean, I laughed at Madeline when I saw that, because obviously you've got the fear side. The story was that they were going to put everyone out the homes and take everyone there and force them to
Like,
get
they
jabs.
built it for them.
Yeah, homes for members of parliament, right? HMP.
Right.
Yeah. And they were building their
Are
own
they still a
facilities.
thing? Are they? I don't know. I don't know where those are, but
To be honest, it's sort of, you know, Major General William Walker, right, after, well, it's a story, and there's a lot of actors playing roles, but after the elections were stolen in the States, Major General William Walker on the 18th of January 2021 stood optically in front of the ring-fenced Corporation of Washington DC on the morning news and said, "We are here to provide the smooth transition of military power." And then a couple of weeks later, 9 of the 11 heads of the Pentagon were removed. Now, a lot of people would have seen the DGAL paper in 2020, which is an analytical arm of the Pentagon that showed the depopulation, the populations they wanted in every country around the world. They wanted 15 million left here, right? But 19 million never took one, and 74% that did take one stopped at 2. So we managed to mitigate the collateral damage. And, you know, the statistics are there, and it's devastating, and I'm sure a lot of people feel the same, that we think we could have, you know, when I walked into that centre in the October with Dale in Bristol, it was powerful, because there were little ones in there holding their hands about to go in and get it, and you know, that was over a year on from when we'd stopped it in Dorset, and you know, that was hard, and it's it's easy to say there's an 8,200% increase in the death rate of 10 to 14-year-olds from the January of 2021 to March 2022, but that's someone's son and daughter, and that's painful. And when you've got someone stood in front of you that you may have well have said it in Chinese because they're just not computing, that's hard to maintain that dignity and that honour, because, you know, in another space and place, that conversation wouldn't have gone the same way. But this was such a bigger scale. You know, when I wanted to see what was going on in 2020. So in the September of 2020, I went up to there was some sort of rally going on, and I went up to Trafalgar Square, and there was possibly 10,000 people, and I was like, well, that's not enough. And I saw what was being orchestrated. I walked around Horse Guard Parade, around Trafalgar Square, and I could see all the target support group all lined up with their riot helmets on, the shields, and all the police were on a balcony above with their long cameras. So it was like they were waiting for something. And next thing, I see a load of young men coming in. It was reasonably cold, but they all came in, they were wearing the t-shirts. It just, for me, instantly, I was like, they look like they've walked off a military barracks, or they're paid agitators. That's the impression I got. And next thing I know, they're all pushing forward, they're all doing exactly what I thought they were going to do. One of them got handed a beer bottle. He held it in his hand in a menacing way. And yeah, I mean, I managed to get it out of his hand and smash it on the ground, and then I went around the front of them and I stood between the police and them to try and calm the situation down. And then, I don't know if you remember this, but for some reason a chair appeared from nowhere, and some woman got stood on the chair to the side of the stage. And she was obviously wearing body armour, and she got kicked off the chair, and it was just all chaos loose. And that's when I knew, when you connect the dots with what they wanted to happen, when you look at the lockstep Rockefeller paper from 2010, they had specific time frames, and they desperately wanted us to go into civil unrest so they could impose stricter measures. So I knew that we had to do it the opposite way, and it had to be done peacefully. And then the next day, the guy had actually taken the bottle out of his hand. He was on the front page of the paper with blood coming out his ear. And it was all dried. So, there's certain things that have gone on through this period that we had to change them, because they were definitely going down one route. And because we've dealt with this the right way, and we haven't gone into civil unrest, and everyone's conducted themselves with honour and from a place of love, and no one's got aggressive, everyone's articulates everything well, everyone's got the knowledge, everyone's approached everything in a completely peaceful manner and just stood up for our rights. This is why we're here now. This is why we've got this. Any other questions?
Mine was a quick one. Will you write a book? So I think it'd be very interesting.
Never read a book. Wouldn't know where to start.
Audio book.
Yeah, audio.
I was just wondering, if it's all over, why have we still got Granny Keir Starmer in power?
But this is what I'm saying. It's you think that's Keir Starmer.
2.0. But why?
There's a narrative that's been played out, right? So we would have also been monitored all the way through this, all our social media posts, all our phone calls and everything. Everything's been captured. But we did have a role to play, a massive role to play, because we had to come from the bottom up. That whole story of draining the swamp. How do you get rid of everybody? They've been doing this for years. We have to make sure that when we transition, everyone that needed to be captured has been captured. And like I said in Parliament, depending on your complicity or the level of complicity in a crime, justice will be served. But this is the other point of all of this, is we had to give them the opportunity. So when I first started going to their place of business, I would say to the judge, I'm not here to judge you, I'm just here to speak the truth. This is actually your day of redemption. This is your opportunity to do the right thing. And twice now, even when I was in the court with Dale, the judge has taken the opportunity and put the onus of responsibility on the person making the claim. So they did it on Dale's case with the bank, and when I was in the family court, the judge put the onus on social services. So that's in the knowing that there's a lot more good people in all of these systems. The systems are, nurses, doctors, occupational therapists have all told me the system's broken and it can't be fixed. And we were walking around London with 100,000 nurses and doctors and paramedics in 2021. So there'd be a lot of good people doing the right thing. There's not many people that join up to be a nurse or a paramedic who are intrinsically bad people. And this is why we've had to approach it the way we've approached it. And we must make sure this can't happen again. And how can you make it sure it doesn't happen again if you don't know how it happened in the first place? So that's why I don't take any of it personally. We just had to do what we had to do.
You're articulate, you're intelligent, you have the ability to stand and quote all these things. If we were in that position, we would just fumble and not be able to quote any of that. How would we gain access to that information?
I share everything I can. I don't have a massive social media presence, but for me, it's getting simpler and simpler. Is if you're approached by someone that's got a claim against you, you just say, I'm not that person, because you're not lying. because that is not you. That's their legal fiction they've created. You don't even need to engage with them. I mean, what I did to the last bailiff that came up to me was like, look, I don't know who you're looking for. As far as I'm concerned, that person is dead lost at sea. Right? And I wouldn't even start to engage with them with any of your paperwork because I know everything that you've got is fraud. And all of you are all over the internet. I said, so please leave my property, you're trespassing. You know, you don't have to articulate anything or tell them because it is not you they're looking for. That's your, and it's just been proved that they have no jurisdiction over the legal fiction. So you can just simplify it all. You just rebut them.
Have you always had a good memory, or is it something you developed? Because you reel off these like dates in time, but it's just repetition.
That's all correct.
Huh? I don't know, but it gives you sound pretty good.
When you get through it, you're not
It definitely,
I forget what I done last week.
it definitely improved when I started using frequency. I know that for a fact. I mean, to a point where my 12-year-old actually said a few months ago, Dad, do you think you've just become autistic? So he's seen a massive change in me. Yeah, that's worrying.
No, but because that autism thing. So I remember there was a guy, they flew him over London in a helicopter.
Stephen, yeah.
And he drew it all like out of memory, like perfect.
Yeah. I mean, it's exciting. I believe we've all got these amazing capabilities. Yeah.
To tap into them.
Yeah.
I mean, such a big hammer.
How do you get involved in the frequency?
Say again?
How do you get involved in even going into the whole study of frequencies?
No, all it was because I'd seen this reference to spiritual warfare and saw the human resonance, and that was based on the Earth's frequency being 7.83 hertz, and it had increased to 12 hertz. I talked to a friend years ago about a place called the Bob Monroe Institute in America, which ran like a super soldier program where they used binaural beats, one resonance in one ear, one resonance in the other, so soldiers could learn for you. So I just thought that would be quite a handy skill. So I just started playing around with frequency, and I was amazed how incredible it was because I could feel it working, physically working. And I'd like to say to people, when you try the frequency, certain times you'll try another frequency and it won't resonate with you. It just doesn't feel right. So just move to one that does. Because we're all going to have different blockages and so we've used it effectively we've integrated it with, because we've got a set of the quantum pods, which a company called Orinoco have. And what they've done, the quantum physicists have captured the photon lights and nanoparticles of the sun, and then they've meticulously sprayed them onto tiny pieces of copper, and then house them in this perspex pillar. So they have 3 pillars, and they continually send out the pure life force energy. So if you imagine when you're in that energy field, your aura, your energy magnetic field around you is a direct reflection of where your energy is within you. So if your intention, when you set an intention, you can draw what you need from that pure life force energy and bring it in. So you can put yourself into that place of homeostasis. And, that's why healing it's a personal thing. Everyone has that amazing ability to be able to heal themselves. And, your pineal gland, when activated, does release dimethyltryptamine, serotonin, melatonin, oxytocin. So we have these abilities. When we're in control of our vibration and frequency, we can heal ourselves. Obviously that is not something they would ever have wanted us to know. Having a business model based on petroleum-based pharmaceutical drugs, that ultimately would have a frequency in them that would give you a contrary indication, which basically would put your body at dis-ease with itself. Anyone else?
Some twat in the back.
Yeah, that's my Welsh mate. Yeah.
Is there a measure of success that we can visibly see? Like Dale's situation obviously was, don't know why that happened, if we're sort of winning or getting there. So is there a measure of success that we can look at anything?
When you look at the fact that for a long time, like 2023, 1st of March 2023, I read out the UCC 1-308 finding to Dorset County Court. Right, so the reason that jumped out at me at the time was because it said 40 days to 40 nights, and I thought that's pretty good, right? So it gave every corporation, every institution, every establishment, religious establishment as well, 40 days and 40 nights to rebut the 12 presumptions of law and affidavits to be true. As they were unable to do it, they were thanked, and sovereign status was handed back to we the people. We were no longer considered dead, lost at sea. So I read that to the county court on the 1st of March 2023. Then we come forward, and then the birth certificate. And the reason the UCC, Uniform Commercial Code, is so important is because every single corporation in the United Kingdom is registered on Dun& Bradstreet, and it has to be in order to get paid through the Federal Reserve Bank. And that all goes back to the Bretton Woods system, 1944, where the Bank of England agreed to back GB sterling with the US dollar. And then obviously Nixon, 15th of August 1971, took us out of the gold standard. And then our belligerent government in 1972 stole sovereign status from the Crown in an act of treason, which therefore means that every act, statute, bylaw, and piece of legislation from the 1st of January 1973 is actually an act of treason against us. And I gave that in as evidence to the court as well. And none of this has ever been rebutted, so it stands as truth. But how do you get that out to everyone? And how does everyone then stand in it? So that's why I shared, obviously, my court case, the King versus Steve James Forsyth. You've now got Yvonne Watson versus Northumbria Water. That is case law as of the 6th of August 2025. The gap cannot be bridged between a corporation and the legal fiction. The legal fiction ties into the birth certificate being classed as securities fraud. Therefore, everything against us must be dismissed, through to the Forsyth Street doctrine.
Can we look this up somewhere, Steve?
Yeah, it's all that. It's all that. This is the thing. Everything I'm saying, you can literally go and Google and look up. It's all there, and it is trusted.
What would you Google?
Through to the Forsyth Street doctrine. I think it's a 47 or 74 page document. The Austin Chronicle, the 10th of March 2025. That's that Austin Chronicle. I've actually got a copy of it, which I shared on the Lighthouse.
Would that apply in the UK as well? Is that in the US?
Yeah,
or?
This is why I sort of tried making the point that it does, because every corporation, including HMR Courts and Tribunal Services, the City of London, the UK Parliament, are all registered corporations on Dun& Bradstreet. So therefore the Uniform Commercial Code is their code of conduct that they have to comply with. So if you get a public announcement made through their code of conduct, they have to comply with it. And I think that was very hard for people to get their heads around for a long time. But, it's, I know a lot of people have used that effectively. But you know, there would have been a lot of barristers and lawyers who would have no clue about any of this. You know, the reason the fruit of the poison street doctrine, like I said before, comes out of it is because it said 99% of lawyers and barristers don't know about it.
But that's the problem, though, isn't it? Like when you go to if you have to challenge anything or anything like that, they're just not going to know about it.
Yeah.
Well, that was the point of professions, though, wasn't it? It's to indoctrinate it. It's to give you enough to make a good living,
Yes.
not enough to cause a stir.
Yeah. What's the book the barristers you study? Little Devil?
The Devil's Handbook.
The Devil's Handbook, yeah. Can't make it up, really. Yeah.
One thing, there's also mentioned the unsigned warrant.
The what, sorry?
Unsigned warrant.
Yeah, that was, sorry,
Yeah.
the King's Bench, 16th of December 2022, it's KB 2022004709 is the number. That basically the judge ruled that any unsigned warrant in wet ink or without a wet stamp cannot be enforced. But the reality is that, you know, if HMR Courts and Tribunal Services is a registered entity on Dun and Bradstreet as a corporation for profit, what I said in the court was, if you're a foreign registered corporation for profit paid for by a privately owned bank, which the Federal Reserve is, there can be no integrity, there can be no impartiality, and there can be no justice served. You are a fraudulent, deceptive, and treasonous place of business. That's what you are. And that's been given to all the courts as well. Because that's what they are. And, you know, again, as harsh as it is, John D. Rockefeller's Masonic Creed, we will keep their lives short, we will keep their minds weakened, all the while making them believe we're doing the opposite. We had to escape. This is the construct. And it's finished. And do you know what? It is going to be incredible, because no one will really have ever experienced what true freedom is. And, you know, you've all got to remember, this legal fiction was created from your Sescovade Trust. Your birth certificate was used to create a financial bond. You know, so everyone, you know, the narrative they wanted to spin, it's like a flip of a story. You know, their narrative was by 2030 you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. But all the elites live their life they have trusts. They don't own anything. And they still want that. They just wanted control and power. But you know, Steve said to me earlier, you can't destroy energy, you can only transfer. And this is a transfer of everything. And this is the flip. We'll have our own trusts. And we don't have to own anything. But we're already happy. Because we're no longer slaves, we're free. It's good. Yeah.
Because that's a massive thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like, to actually experience.
Yeah.
Yeah. Massive.
Yeah. So the consciousness raising, because I like you, see this in spiritual wars. We practice a lot of yoga and meditation, and I agree with you that you can feel a certain frequency inside yourself, and then you can act. I feel, I want to say this to you, you've had a very positive consciousness raising effect on me personally tonight. I feel like more enriched,
Oh, thank you.
you know, more positive. And thank you so much for what you're doing. It's very profound.
Oh, thank you.
So what about what they're doing at the moment, which is 50 cities, rolling out those cameras? I mean, when is that?
Well, the Royal Court of Justice just announced, if you want to look at a story, the Royal Court of Justice announced 3 days ago that facial recognition cameras are unlawful. You know, so every single thing that they were going to implement hasn't happened, has it?
No.
But, you know, we had the roadmap in 2020, obviously digital ID was on there, but within 10 minutes of them saying they're going to roll out the digital ID, everyone's sharing the fact that Tony Blair's son is getting £100 billion contract to build the app. I mean, it's ludicrous. None of it's happening.
So when are these people going to start to face justice? Because they're still working at the
Well, see, this is the other thing. The reality is every council in the UK is bankrupt, has no money. Right, so, like I said, 2,500 CEOs removed. There's been an ongoing process in the background of people being removed. There's been military tribunals ongoing, they're under the law of war. You would never get justice through a corrupt system. So it had to be done by a law, and it just happened to be the law of war. So it is a military global alliance, and Space Force was announced in 2021 in the UK, which is the cyber part of the warfare, by Air Vice Marshal Paul Godfrey in 2020. He went live and actually spoke about it. So everything's been captured, absolutely everything. And it's that, you know, and as quick as you're sending in emails and putting in your evidence, that is being collated onto a quantum computer. We've been shown the drip feeding of AI. You know, with the technology they've actually got. You know, when we were in, just give you an example, when we were in the military, you know, I think 1980, we were using a thing called a KL-43, which is an encryption-decryption little metal box, before we even had pages on mobile phones. So if you actually think of the real technology they've got, when you're looking at these triangular craft flying around now, the TR-3Bs, you know, they were fully disclosed in 2021 as these magnetic propulsion craft. So they've always had, you know, we didn't go, they had a reset in the early 1900s as well. And we haven't gone from flying 100 metres in 1903, Wilbur and Orville Wright, to suddenly having magnetic craft in 100 years. We've done nothing for the last 1,000 years. You know, we've lived through a complete and utter silence, a lie. And the truth is our salvation, and everyone will hear and see the truth. Only a week ago, the AWS went down again, the bank systems went down again. There has to be, they did a global blanket media campaign to create fear using the highest military grade psychological warfare. So the only bomb that's ever going to be dropped is the truth bomb, and everyone will hear and see the truth. There's no other way, and it needs to happen now. You know, and it is done. And whatever we put out there happens. You know, so many of you will have talked about something and miraculously looked at your phone the next day and seen exactly what you're talking about on the phone. Because that's a personal message. They have that capability. They can capture what you put out in there. So they've been engaging us. You know, if you change your whole perception and believe you have the ability to create in the now for the future, that is the outcome. We decide the outcome. And if you want to, we can't continue to play their game because it's over. They've told us it's over. They've set case laws. They're telling us, stand in that. We're giving you all the information. Just come together and all stand on the same page. And say it's done. And we're not having it anymore.
So this is about numbers, really, isn't it?
Well, you know, it doesn't take a lot to go forward, right? And so many people have had to go to different areas of all of this. But we had to, what would it look like on the other side through a transition? Who are going to be the trusted people to guide others forward? The people that have been through the whole process and have stood their ground. And it's like, when you look at all the stand in the parks, the people holding the yellow boards, for years now they've been standing in the rain, standing in the cold,
natural selection. So these people carried on doing what they were doing, but that wasn't their role, was it? We agreed to do this. No one forced us to do this. But you have to have a transfer, and you have to have a transfer of leadership and guidance, and we have to take on that responsibility. You know, and we don't need centralised governments. Every single community has people that have stood their ground. You know, they're getting bought coffees now by other members of the community that were basically called them idiots 5 years ago. You know, so they're on the respected members of the community. So when all these people are removed, everyone will come together. It's the landscape. We need to know that is the truth. Yeah. Done?